Hey guys, Andrew Beckford at E3 2019, where I just got out of the Xbox briefing and the Xbox showcase. Now, I would have filmed inside of the showcase, but it was really loud in there, and security wouldn't let me film outside for some reason. They let me last year, it wouldn't let me this year. So I'm actually in the LA Convention Center at the heart of E3, inside of the newsroom, so please forgive the surroundings, and if I'm not speaking loud enough, I'm trying to be considerate of the other journalists behind me, so bear with me. I had the opportunity to interview Dan Greenawalt about the future of the Forza franchise. We knew there would be no new Forza Motorsport game announced at this E3 because back in March, Dan and the entire Turn 10 team announced that they would be taking a whole new approach in their development cycle for Forza Motorsport games, and they would involve the community more. So my question was, what does that mean for the future of Forza? Dan was kind enough to answer a few of those questions for me, as well as a couple of questions from the Forza community. Though I have to make a disclaimer here, when I say a couple of questions, I really mean a couple of questions. My time with Dan was limited, so I didn't have the chance to ask him as many community questions as I have been in the past. So I picked 3 of the best ones and I pitched those to him. But when I sat down with Dan, one of the first things I wanted to ask him was why they decided to change their entire philosophy on the development of Forza games. If you are really being honest with yourself, Forza has been pretty successful from the get-go. They've had a really structured system where there was a new Forza game every year, alternating between Motorsport and Horizon games. And for the most part, each game they've released have been critically well received. Obviously, there have been some bumps in the road. We all remember Forza 5 and the microtransaction controversy with Forza Motorsport 7. But for the most part, things have been positive. So as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, why fix it? This is what Dan had to say.
You know, car culture is changing and game development's changing and gaming culture is changing. We wanted to take a step back with motorsport and readdress what's our core mission. We're trying to shape the future of automotive entertainment, and we believe that means building communities, car communities, gaming communities, and there's a lot of things that have changed in this industry, so how can we adopt new features, new ideas, change up that formula? That's all going to start with how we actually build the game. So the team is looking at a customer-first community building approach, and that meant supporting motorsport longer than ever. New features, we flighted, we did some betas. We also brought a lot of new players in-house to do panels and discussions and really understand what our gamers, our players are looking for. And now moving on to the next thing we do, the motorsport team has brought that approach forward. So they're bringing players in, building communities that we can test with, some over email, some over Skype, and then of course some actually in-house playing code. So we're in the concept phase right now, but it's totally different. And in many ways, it reminds me of the original Forza Motorsport. When we didn't really have a date we were pushing towards, we knew we wanted to bring new and radical innovation. At the time, there was the hard drive and the NIC card, the original Xbox. And so we were looking at features like the optimal line and the livery editor, as well as Drivatar. All those features came out of that sort of ideation and rapid prototyping. So we're trying to embrace a new style of development, but also get into just that wild innovation space that we were known for many years ago.
So the next thing I asked about was the initial announcement they made back in March when they first revealed they were changing their development philosophy. I kind of got the vibe that they were going for a more experimental approach rather than having a structured plan, but I wasn't entirely sure. So I asked them, is this a play it by ear situation, or do you have a structured plan in place?
Yeah, I'd say we're doing a little bit of both experimentation as well as traditional game development. There are things that we know we want to do with our engine. There are research projects going on the physics side that are just research, and that's our bread and butter. We've been doing that for years to keep our physics on the cutting edge. There's some research on the AI side. Those are more traditional style development. Same thing with our engine. The Forza Tech engine is getting new developments for increased usage of power and PC and new technology coming in. But when it comes to some of the gameplay modes and some of those features, that's where we're doing the rapid iteration, prototyping. Some of those prototypes are just on paper. We just come up with a spec and a design, we bring a small group in, we talk to them and get some feedback. Some of the prototyping is done in code, but there's not a date on it. We just keep working on it, and we're finding some really cool stuff that we wouldn't have done in the past because it doesn't necessarily look like the right thing to do on paper, but then when you start doing it, you start building it, the fun really comes out of it.
So obviously those that have been paying attention know that the Forza Street mobile game was kind of an unexpected move from Turn 10 Studios. It made me curious if the team was planning on expanding the brand to other mediums as well, maybe television, film, or documentary.
You know, mobile games were a place that we thought was an obvious extension for the Forza franchise. You know, I look at a lot of mobile games that feature cars and I think, you know, that's something where our special sauce, high quality cars, great rendering, really good gameplay mechanics, we could come into that space and get a whole new type of gamer excited about cars, and that's what our vision's all about. So Forza Street actually started as Miami Street in soft launch. So we were funding the development of this game way back when. It has been going on for actually quite a while as we were ideating new mechanics, bringing some of Forza tech into this mobile space, low-powered machines, touch platforms, you know, really playing with new gameplay mechanics. So it was called Miami Street to soft launch it so we could look at how it was progressing. In mobile, it's called KPIs, Key Performance Index. We were looking at how many players got through the beginning of it and what sort of ratings were they giving us and how many players came back after a day or after a week or after a month. So as we looked at that data, we started going into new regions, the Netherlands and Canada, and eventually we did the global launch of it, and that's when we changed over the name to Forza Street. So it was always meant to be Forza Street, but we didn't want the name Forza to color those indicators, right? That metric. And we actually saw that. As soon as it was named Forza, a new type of player came in, and they actually retained longer, they were playing the game more, because there are people that love Forza, they know Forza. So as we keep developing this, you know, the game's still really in soft launch in many ways. It's going to be moving on to mobile, iOS and Android, where I think it's actually a much more native experience. You know, one button, you can just get in, you can play it for 15 seconds or 15 minutes. And we'll keep iterating on it and making it great. What's cool is we can have different teams that aren't taking from each other. So we've got a motorsport team, we have a Horizon team, we have the Forza Street team, all working on different products, and they don't rob from each other, but they're gonna build a broader community, a much bigger community. And hopefully, you know, you get excited about cars on your phone and then you think, hey, you know, I'm ready to actually start mastering cars, or I wanna go explore something like with Horizon. Even Lego, you know, it's bringing in a new group of players, the next generation of car lovers. And that's what this franchise is all about. So, you know, I'm pretty excited about Street, but to your question, where do we go next? There are a lot of things we're looking at, but we don't want to move into a space until we have a longer term plan. So even though I was mentioning that motorsport, we don't have a date for that yet, we still have a plan for it. You know, a plan for how we grow this community and how we do a new style of development. It's just a little bit looser than it has been in the past when we had a date we were specifically marching towards.
So the next thing I did was sort of rewind things a bit to when I interviewed Dan about Forza Motorsport 7 right around the time that Xbox One X was launched. Since it was such a powerful console, I wondered if the Turn 10 team would explore going with VR in Forza Motorsport 7. At the time, Dan explained that it wasn't really part of their strategy, either within Turn 10 or Microsoft, to push VR on consoles, and it was more of a PC thing, but even then, it wasn't something that would be applied to the Forza PC games. Now, if you were paying attention to the Xbox briefing, they revealed a preview of the Xbox Project Scarlett, which is supposed to be 4 times more powerful than Xbox One X. With a system that powerful, I wondered if VR was something that they would take a second look at.
Well, you know, right now we're really looking at new experiences that bring a new type of player. And I don't mean a casual player, I mean a new hardcore player, a new player that's really wanting to learn about racing fast, motorsport, and cars, that mastery. With xCloud, with Game Pass, with PC, we're able to reach a broader group of gamers than ever before. So our goal is not to broaden by going to a lower demographic or even a higher demographic, but just reaching more of our tribe and making great experiences that bring them in. But that's still for a lot of people. So when I look at the technology that's going to enable our future, for me it's less about VR and it's more about PCs, all spectrum. It's looking at, you know, future hardware that we're going to be going to. It's looking at, you know, obviously xCloud. I mean, it's a really cool technology to play with, and we played a lot of builds of our stuff across that, as well as just Game Pass and how that's bringing people from PC and Xbox together. That's how we're going to build this larger community. But VR, it's not that we're against VR as a group by any means. It's not where our strategic focus is right now. And as the team is ideating and coming up with brand new ways of play, it's not really been our main focus.
The next thing I wanted to ask is, I'm sure, a question that many of us want to know, and that is if the next Forza Motorsport game will be available for the current generation of consoles, or will we have to wait until Project Scarlett launches in holiday of 2020?
Well, again, we don't have a date. So it's a really different development process than we've done in the past. When we were working on Forza Motorsport 5, we had a date. We were really looking at the launch of that console. But the difference between the Xbox 360 to the Xbox One launch is backwards compatibility and forwards compatibility and things like Game Pass, xCloud, PC. That really wasn't in the landscape back then. Today, we're looking at a much broader group of gamers across all these different devices, and that's where we're going to build these communities from. So even on PC, there are incredibly high-end PCs in the market today, but we want to make sure we're servicing not only those high-end PC players, but actually PCs that you can, like normal people, can play on as well through new advanced options. We're also looking at a lot of accessibility, how players are able to customize the look of the game, the UI, the font, the background, subtitles, text-to-speech, speech-to-text, all of these different technologies to, again, bring players into our tribe, people that are going to love cars moving forward. That means we are less hardware-focused than ever before. But our engine is extensible to the point where we can take incredibly high advantage of any piece of hardware that's in front of us. So a very high-end PC or anything coming down the pipe. Now, as a creator, I'm very excited about Project Scarlett. This is something our whole team's been on board with for a long time. It's an exciting piece of hardware, and we're going to, of course, light up great experiences as a franchise as Xbox moves into that future. But the Motorsport team itself is not focused squarely on any one date or on any one piece of hardware. It's about broadening to a huge group of car lovers.
From here, I went into the questions from the community. Now, as I mentioned before, I didn't have a lot of time with Dan, so I was only able to ask him about 3 questions, 2 of which are from the same user on the Forza Motorsport forums, and I was able to pull 1 from Reddit. So the first question comes from the official Forza Motorsport forums from user Manteo Max. He was asking about locked cars. In Forza Motorsport 7, there was a decent amount of locked cars that were unlocked later. The locked car count increased in Forza Horizon 4. He wanted to know what players can expect as far as availability for all game content when it comes to the next Forza game.
It's a great question, and Manteo Max always asks great questions, which I appreciate. Like I was saying about features being kind of a means to an end, the way we were doing locking in Forza Motorsport, the goal was to actually get players to really seek after cars and want to go get those. But we heard from our fans that they just want to drive those cars now. They want to get into them. So we changed it. So it's really in response to the fans. With Forza Horizon right now, we're seeing huge engagement. People are getting involved in Forzathons, they're playing these seasons. So right now it seems like people are having a great time with it, and we love that. So we're going to make decisions over time based on not only what this fan says or that fan says, but what we see in the data. How are people playing? Are people retaining and they're coming back? And right now, Forza Horizon is going really strong. We've got a ton of players. They seem to really be enjoying it. So right now, it doesn't feel like it's broke, but we're going to react. So as players give us feedback, we'll take a look at it.
The next question came from the Forza Reddit page /rforza from user Coconut Dust. He had kind of a long question, so I'm going to reread it here from my phone, so bear with me. He wanted to know about the overall number of tracks in Forza. He said that the number of tracks in the game has increased very slowly. Forza 4 had 26 locations, and over 6 years later, Forza 7 has 32, which is an increase of only 1 new location per year. He wants to know if the next Forza will prioritize expanding the set of environments, which broadens the experience of the game.
This is actually a fantastic question about how the question is about how many environments there are, but I think there's a question underneath the question, which is how do you make environments? And for us, we've added new features and new technology at our games that's required us to rebuild tracks. Whether it was 4K resolution and higher MIP levels, greater detail on the track, more extensible usages of the track, it meant the tracks have to be rebuilt. At this point, when I was saying that we're doing a player-centric approach, and some of our first, I guess you'd say, players or customers are internal. And that has to do with our internal, tools. The tools we use to build the tracks that our artists and our designers use to make tracks, we're working on that workflow to make it faster than ever. So in the past, it took us a long time to make a track, and we would have to remake that track as new features came in, like dynamic weather and alternate times of day, new ribbons coming in. These were features that made us rebuild tracks. We're hoping to speed that up so that our artists are empowered and they can create tracks that are more extensible. As far as what that means for numbers, I don't know, because again, we're not announcing those sort of things, but honestly, I don't know either. We don't have a date. What we're doing is looking at how we can speed up the rapid iteration process, which makes us more responsive to each other inside the studio and more responsive to our fans. Tracks, the thing I love about motorsport is I love mastering a car and a track combination. Some people love the racecraft, really passing other people. I love just like the bounty hunter events and time attack and really hot lapping, really mastering a car. I love that. And that's the interesting thing about Horizon, where you're really exploring, and motorsport, where you're mastering and perfecting. So I think we know what these things are really good for, but we need to speed up our process as a team to make them really, that high quality, but make it more quickly.
Finally, I was able to squeeze in one more bonus question, and this one is from the official Forza Motorsport forums again, and once again it's from Max. I know it sucks to kind of pick two from the same guy, but he had a really good question that even Dan was impressed with. Max wanted to know, between movies, reality TV, gaming, streaming, car reviews, pro competition, ride sharing, and auctions, where does he see the current heart of the automotive culture in 2019? And that is a damn good question.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
Dude, that is a great question. So Menteo Max, thank you very much. A great question about where is the heart of automotive car culture right now. And I think right now it's kind of fractured. It's across multiple places. I think you look at drift culture and how it really, got really big maybe 10 years ago, more street culture, which then kind of moved into drift culture. But that's really like alive right now. Young people getting involved, grassroots. There's still the kind of like Lemons and Budget Cup kind of grassroots racing. There's always this big event racing, NASCAR, IndyCar, F1. And these groups don't necessarily all talk. I mean, they're really disparate groups. I love that Horizon and Motorsport both bring these groups together. So my hope is that the heart of car culture as we move into the next 5 years is digital. It is Forza Motorsport, it is Forza Horizon, Street, and other things that we get into. Because that is the place where we can build a community that brings these groups together. It's hard to bring them together when they're in different parts of the world and they're organizing these big major events. Digitally, there are things that we can do you just can't do in the real world. And I love that. And it can be covered in streaming. We don't have to televise this. Fans can televise events happening in games that can't be done in the real world because you can't get those cars and those events together at the same time. So I'm hoping that the future of the heart of car culture is digital, and that the real world is somewhere you go when you're a super fan. You learn about drifting in a game, or you learn about antique cars, so you want to go to an auction. You learn about these things on streams, in community forums with each other, and then you go and replicate them in the real world. Because a lot of these things are grassroots. They're brought up by passionate people. Where do they get that passion from? I hope it's Forza.
That is lofty, but I appreciate that.
We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and it's I've been doing this job a really long time, and I'm still pretty fired up about it. And it's because our ambitions are so high, and Xbox asks nothing of us besides keep our ambitions high. So they're asking us to change the world, build communities, be inclusive, make gaming for everyone. Hallelujah. I'm on board, man. I live for that. So our team is able to say, yes, let's jump into this and let's make something really cool. So I need lofty ambitions. If we're just pumping out an experience, it's just not the same way as trying to change something I love so desperately. I mean, I love gaming. I love that I game with my kids. I love making games with my kids, and I love cars. I mean, you and I chat about cars all the time. I love cars. So I want to make more people that or create that space where more people can be in our tribe.
Again, just like I mentioned before, he's really, really passionate. While I am a little bit bummed that we're gonna have to wait a while before we see the next Forza Motorsport game, I am looking forward to the future. It's a really creative team over there at Turn 10 Studios, and so far I've been thoroughly impressed with everything that they've put out. Yeah, they've had their bumps in the road, but for the most part, they've given me a lot of hours of entertainment, and I think they've really brought a new audience to the car culture, which is always gonna be a plus in my book. And in the meantime, I can play LEGO Speed Champions. I hope you enjoyed this video with Dan. I want to thank him and the Turn 10 team and Microsoft for giving me the opportunity to sit down with him and interview him. If you want to see more from E3 2019, including all the racing games and racing game accessories we're going to look for, subscribe to this channel and make sure you hit the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified right away when new videos go live. Thanks again for watching.